Benedetto, head of EMEA for Endeavor Catalyst, the venture capital fund of Endeavor, which is leading community of high growth, high impact entrepreneurs around the world. They actually, with 51% of Endeavor Catalyst unicorn being invested in the Series A or earlier, Endeavor Catalyst is the most successful investor at the early stage in unicorn outside of the US, China, and India. Pete has been with Endeavor for nearly 10 years and served in a variety of roles, from entrepreneur support to international expansion. But most importantly, why we are happy to see you here, Peter, is because recently Endeavor launched its chapter in Ukraine, Endeavor Ukraine. So Pete today will actually address the issue about does and don'ts while fundraising. Floor is yours, Peter.
Many thanks, and sorry I cannot be there with all of you. Is it okay if I share my screen? Let's see here. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen now. And can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, thank you for the warm introduction. I apologize that this presentation is in English and not in Ukrainian. And I also apologize that I'm not there in person. I will hopefully be visiting very soon, hopefully in the next year. But thank you all for having me. I super appreciate it. So as the host described, Endeavor is a global organization supporting founders in emerging markets all over the world. We describe ourselves as the leading global community of by and for high impact entrepreneurs. High impact entrepreneurs are those we describe as those we say they dream big, they scale up, and most importantly, they pay it forward in terms of supporting the next generation. So within this large global nonprofit organization, we have a global investment fund called Endeavor Catalyst. That is the part of the organization that I currently work in. And I'll say just a very little bit about that, and then I'll get into the do's and don'ts of fundraising. So very quickly, just so you know a little bit about us, Endeavor's model is to support entrepreneurs globally and help them create an impact by innovating and creating jobs, high quality jobs in emerging and underserved markets all over the world. So we do this by supporting entrepreneurs, elevating them as role models in their communities, and also investing in them. You can see some of our highlight numbers here. We support over 2,600 entrepreneurs. They've created over 4 million jobs, and collectively last year drove over $67 billion in revenues. Just to tell you where we are in the world, we operate in 45 different countries. We started out in Latin America. We then expanded into the Middle East and Africa and Southeast Asia. Ukraine is our very newest office. We are super proud to now have a presence there and to be supporting Ukrainian founders. And I'll say a little bit more about that at the very end. So just to give you kind of a quick highlight on our fund, a little bit of our background. So within this organization, this global organization, we do have this fund, Catalyst. We now have 4 funds, collectively over $540 million in assets under management that we've been investing. We've made over 330 investments out of that fund. 59 of the companies we've invested in have grown up to become unicorn businesses. We've had 26 exits, including 11 publicly listed companies, and we hope to invest in a Ukrainian founder in the near future. As was mentioned, we have just started operating in the country. My colleague Sviat is the new managing director of the office, and I'm sure he would be happy to connect with all of you. So I want to dive in. The title of my talk is the do's and don'ts of fundraising. A lot of this is pretty simple, straightforward advice. Hopefully it gets all of you thinking, and is a good thought starter for you. And then I'm going to leave you with a resource at the end that'll hopefully provide help as you go forward. If you're a founder or if you're an early investor, just want to leave you with that. So very quickly, I think it's often said that it's good to begin with the end in mind, and I think oftentimes, especially when you're in fundraising mode, it can be attractive to think about completing the round, raising the money as the goal, right? And I think it's super important to think long term about the capital raising process, because it's a marathon and not a sprint, right? And if you don't think about kind of where you want to go and your ultimate objective for the business you're building, you can make short-term trade-offs that ultimately kind of hurt your potential to do so. So really think about it as a marathon, and don't make those trade-offs that could potentially harm you. And an example of that would be, selecting the type of investor, selecting the partners that that you didn't just get along with in the first couple of meetings, but somebody that you want to develop and build a relationship with for the long term. Oftentimes they're described as a marriage. One of the things to know is that, venture capital funds are typically structured as 10 years plus 2 years. So oftentimes investors are with their working with founders for 10 to 12 years. That's not a rare circumstance. So if you're going to be working with somebody for 12 years, really think about that long-term relationship that you want to have. Don't raise venture capital if you do not need to. This may seem like an obvious one, but I think oftentimes founders have the idea, hey, I'm building a business. I need resources to do that. I've seen a bunch of other founders who have raised capital. I need to do the same thing. I think it's really worth taking the time and effort to think about, whether you can bootstrap your business and completely self-fund it, or if there are alternative funding sources, or if venture capital is the right option for you. But I wouldn't assume it. And we've seen this play out over the last few years, where not every business model, if you look at it today, things like e-commerce, where the unit, basically online advertising became prohibitively expensive, and all of a sudden, there are a whole slew of e-commerce companies no longer made sense for the venture capital model, and you no longer see them receiving investment, and a number of them had to fold as a result. So it's really important to think about whether venture capital is the right option for you, because once you make that, it's a one-way street. Once you take that check, you have signed on for a long-term relationship with investors who have certain goals and expectations of their own. So if those don't align with your long-term vision, it's best to pursue alternative sources of funding. Do build relationships with investors. I think this may sound obvious. Investors are not always the most fun or interesting folks to hang out with, admittedly, but nevertheless, it is worth spending time getting to know investors, not just one or two, but getting to know several, and also not just those who are local to you, but those in the region, those who are international, to get their perspective on the business. One of the things I'll say later on is that you don't want to come to investors right when you need the money, when you're kind of running out of cash or desperate for funds. You want to build relationships with investors, educate them on your business, hear their perspective, and you want to do that well before you need to raise that capital. But it's really building that relationship, getting to know them, hearing not just one-on-one, but also hearing others' perspectives on them is really crucial to building that relationship. As I just mentioned, you don't want to wait until you need money to begin fundraising. That's kind of the worst time. Your back is against the wall. You're forced to do it. You're a bit desperate, and essentially what it can mean is you're in a rush. You may have limited options, and you may accept money or terms from an investor that you don't ultimately want to partner with. On the other hand as well, you want to make sure that you don't over raise. You don't raise too much money, and you don't raise until you need to. You want to have the business at a point where you're ready to scale and really start to grow, and whatever that means for the stage of company. But you don't want to, investors will be skeptical if you're not at that point where you're ready to accept funding and you really have kind of what they describe as kind of the sources and uses of capital, where you're ready to put that money to work. Do be transparent and honest. And again, this may sound obvious, but oftentimes the obvious things are worth restating. But being open with investors, obviously throughout the relationship, about the business, etc. But what may, even starting out the relationship and when you're pitching them the business, I think it's often helpful to build trust with investors by saying, hey, yes, this is the business, this is the potential of it, this is where we believe we can go. Looking deeper though, these are some of the risks. These are some of the challenges we may run into. But this is how we'll respond to those challenges, to those potential pitfalls, and show them that there are risks to the business, but you do see ahead. And I think being transparent that way will build trust in the long term, and hopefully it sets the stage for a successful relationship. Do seek advice and feedback from experienced mentors. And when I say mentors, I'm especially thinking of both investors and founders. So this is from the very early stages of when you're thinking about raising capital to when you're putting together your pitch deck, when you're getting to understand your business, really knowing your unit economics and knowing your business inside and out, knowing the competitive landscape both locally and globally. So you want to then take that information and along the journey identify investors and other founders who can give you really unbiased, honest feedback on what they see in your business. That's going to be especially valuable to you. This is a quick shout out to the Endeavor Network that I'm obviously a part of, but that's really at the core of what we do, is connect founders to mentors who can help them kind of throughout their journey. Don't view fundraising as a one-way street. Evaluate investors. So, what I mean by this is that, fundraising, oftentimes there can be a power dynamic where, as a founder, you're raising capital, you're looking to you're looking to investors to cut you a check. And it can feel oftentimes that they really hold the cards, they hold the power in that relationship. But it's really important that you see it as a two-way street. And just as they are evaluating you as a founder in your business, you should also be evaluating them as investors. So what that means is talking to other founders who have worked with that firm, who have worked with that partner in particular, and getting honest feedback on what that is like, and talk to those where the relationship has gone well, where the company has done well, and also talk to founders where the company hasn't worked out, and see how the investor treated them throughout that relationship. I think it's really crucial. Again, it can be very attractive to take a quick check, but what you want to do here is really evaluate those investors, and importantly, be ready to say no if they come to you with terms or with a valuation that you do not agree with. It's not a negotiation unless you're willing to walk away. And so you need to be able to walk away if it doesn't feel like a relationship that you want to be in for the long term. Do build a strong team, and hopefully, as a founder, you already have that team developed, but it's important to highlight that, to investors, that it's not just you or just a co-founder, but that you have the ability to attract, strong, talent around you, both technical and non-technical. And then also, what I'd add here as well is advisors. Oftentimes you can bolster your credibility and your track record by bringing in strong advisors, from the industry that you're working in, from potential customers or people who are, formerly executives in the business. So, build out that strong team, show the investors that it's not just yourself that's working on this, that you can attract a strong team around you, because that's what you'll be doing, throughout the journey. Do understand the VC model in fundraising terms. So, it's very important to understand how, venture capital works, how funds are structured, what their incentives and motivations are, what the size of the fund is, what returns they're looking to achieve, and on what timeline. Whether an investor will be able to write a follow-on check, or whether this is going to be the only check that they write to you. These are all kind of crucial pieces of information, and getting to know the basics of the venture business, but also the nuances of a term sheet, and what certain terms mean, what rights the investors will have, if things go well, what does the upside look like, but also if things don't go well, what are the potential outcomes for you as a founder and for your team. The book and the resource that I'll plug here is a book called Venture Deals by Brad Feld. He's the founder of Techstars, alongside David Cohen. Both of those are Endeavor board members and donors. We've worked with them for some years. It's a fantastic organization working with early stage companies. A little bit earlier than us, we work at the scale up stage, but the book Venture Deals is a very good one. I'd highly recommend it to anyone who's interested. And lastly, don't let a no stop you. So often you're going to hear a lot of no's from investors, or very likely that you will. And don't let a no or a few different no's stop you from continuing to build the business, from pursuing other investors. That oftentimes that just means it's not the right fit for that investor in particular. But it does not mean that the business you're building doesn't have incredible potential. I mean, there's story after story of legendary companies where the investors never saw the potential. So I would encourage you not to let that stop you. And that's the last slide I have. I'll just wrap up by saying thank you all very much for having me. It's been great. Hopefully this is some basic but helpful advice or reminders for all of you. Hopefully you could have the chance to connect with our Endeavor team in Sviat in Kiev. But thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Pete.